Imagine this, a crisp winter afternoon, an 8-year-old girl, um, someone really cherished by her family, heads into the forest near her village. She's going to bring home the horses. It's just a simple, everyday kind of moment, one that promises a warm return. But on this day, the horses, they come back, but she doesn't. This isn't just, well, a story of loss. It's really an exploration into how one absolutely brutal act can rip open the fault lines of an entire region. It reveals these deeply entrenched layers of religious tension, land disputes, and political maneuvering. Today, we're dissecting the heartbreaking 2018 case of Asifa Bano in Indian administered Kashmir. Now, this is a region, as you know, disputed by India and Pakistan, where decades of conflict have created this really restive political landscape. And this case, it truly put that already tense state right on edge. Our sources for this deep dive include comprehensive reports from an independent journalist, very direct and poignant interviews with Asifa's family, detailed allegations from the crime branch investigation, and also statements from local lawyers and politicians who really found themselves at the heart of the storm. So our mission here is to take you beyond the surface, distill the most profound insights and connect the dots from these different sources. We'll explore not just the facts of this horrific crime, but the intricate socio-political landscape it laid bare. We want to offer you an unparalleled understanding of a case that profoundly shook an already volatile region. Okay, let's unpack this harrowing story and what it reveals.
Yeah, this case, tragically, it became such a vivid snapshot of the region's deeper fault lines. You often see how a single event can ignite underlying tensions, but the Sifa's case, it just laid bare the entire conflict ecosystem of Kashmir, really. What's truly fascinating and awful, of course, is how quickly a very localized tragedy became a microcosm for these much larger, deeply entrenched conflicts. It's a stark reminder, isn't it? How personal stories can escalate into public and political crises, especially in regions already simmering.
So it wasn't just another tragic story. It was almost, like you said, a template for how religious divides, land disputes, political maneuvering, how it can all converge around one horrific act. What was it about this particular incident that made it so potent in revealing those layers?
Well, it seems like it was the perfect storm, really. You had the victim's identity, the alleged perpetrators, the setting, and all the existing social grievances just combined. They created this scenario where this one child's suffering became a symbol for so much more.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So let's start with Asifa herself. She was an 8-year-old girl from the Gujar community. That's a Muslim nomadic shepherd group. Her family, they described her really vividly. They called her a chirping bird who ran like a deer. They said she was the center of our universe, someone who loved to help look after the herd, and, well, truly, the darling of the community. And a particularly poignant detail from our sources is that she was actually adopted by her aunt and uncle. Her biological parents were tragically killed in an accident some years before. So on that fateful afternoon, January 10th, 2018, her family was living in a temporary dwelling. This was in a village about 72 kilometers east of Jammu city. Asifa went into the forest nearby to bring home the horses. Her mother, Nasima Bibi, she recalled that day very clearly. The horses returned, but Asifa did not. Her father, Muhammad Yusuf Pujwala, he's a 52-year-old man, and their neighbors immediately started a desperate search. They had flashlights, lanterns, even axes, and they plunged deep into the dense forest, searching through the whole night, calling her name, but just no trace of her.
The immediate, all hands on deck search by the community really speaks volumes about their bond, doesn't it? And their sort of instinctual sense of dread. For a nomadic community like the Gujars, who live so closely with their animals and the land, a child's disappearance, especially one connected to their herd, would trigger this immediate, profound alarm. It really highlights how central children are to their communal life and their economy.
It certainly does. Then, 2 days later, January 12th, the family went to file a police complaint. But according to Mr. Pujwala, the police were incredibly unhelpful, dismissive even. He alleged that one officer actually suggested Asifa must have eloped with a boy? I mean, an 8-year-old girl? It's unthinkable. It took significant protests from the Gujar community, they even blocked a highway, to finally force the police to assign officers for the search. But even then, the tragedy just continued to unfold. 5 days later, January 17th, a full week after she went missing, Asifa's body was discovered in bushes in the forest, just a few hundred meters from her home. Her mother, Nasima Bibi, described the horrific details. "It's a memory no parent should ever have to bear," she said. She had been tortured, her legs were broken, her nails had turned black, and there were blue and red marks on her arm and fingers. Her father knew just instantly something unspeakably horrible had happened to his little girl. And this right here is where the investigation takes a truly disturbing turn, revealing layers far beyond the initial crime.
Right. And that initial police response, or maybe the lack of response, coupled with the gruesome discovery, that's a critical flashpoint here. It just immediately erodes trust in the very institutions that are meant to protect citizens. It sets this dark, deeply unsettling tone for everything that follows. When the people meant to safeguard you are perceived as indifferent or worse, complicit, well, it just fractures the social contract.
Precisely. And it was that very breakdown of initial trust that eventually led to a more formal response. 6 days after Asifa's body was found on January 23rd, the Jammu and Kashmir chief minister at the time, Mehbooba Mufti, finally ordered an investigation by the crime branch. That's a special unit of the state police. The charge sheet that the investigators filed detailed a truly shocking sequence of events. Asifa was allegedly confined in a local temple for several days. She was given sedatives to keep her unconscious, and according to the allegations, she was raped for days, tortured, and then finally murdered. She was reportedly strangled to death and then hit on the head twice with a stone, just horrific. 8 men were arrested in connection with her death. This included Sanjay Ram, a 60-year-old retired government officer who was alleged to have planned the crime. His son Vishal, his nephew, who was a juvenile, and his friend Parvesh Kumar were also accused. But the investigation didn't just point to the perpetrators of the crime, it allegedly revealed this disturbing complicity, maybe even an attempted cover-up, reaching into the very institutions meant to deliver justice. What does the implication of 4 police officers, Surinder Verma, Anand Duda, Tilak Raj, and Deepak Kajuria tell us? I mean, one of those officers, Deepak Kajuria, was actually assigned to the initial search for Asifa after the protests. Investigators allege these officers actually washed Asifa's bloodied and mud-spattered clothes before sending them to a forensic lab. That points directly to an attempted cover-up.
Yeah. The alleged involvement of law enforcement immediately raises these profound questions about institutional trust, about impartiality. And that's particularly critical in a region as sensitive and on edge as Indian-administered Kashmir, when the very protectors of the public are implicated, not just in such a heinous act, but in its alleged cover-up. It sends this powerful, chilling message through the whole community. It deepens existing divides. It suggests a systemic breakdown, really. It erodes any remaining faith in the state's capacity to deliver justice impartially. It's just a fundamental betrayal of public trust.
A profound betrayal, absolutely. And what's fascinating, or perhaps revealing, is that the investigation didn't just stop at the crime itself. It delved into the alleged motive. Investigators believe the motive was to terrorize the Gujar community into leaving Jammu. This desire for displacement, our sources show, seems to stem from a deeper conflict over land. The Gujars, being nomadic shepherds, they traditionally use public and forest land in Jammu for grazing, and that practice has recently brought them into conflict with some Hindu residents in the region. Now, our sources present 2 very conflicting narratives here. On one side, you have Palib Hussain. He's a tribal rights activist and lawyer who supported Asifa's family. He stated unequivocally it was about land. He even alleges he was arrested and threatened by local police for his activism, suggesting there was fierce resistance to his efforts. But then you have Ankur Sharma. He was one of the lawyers who protested on behalf of the accused. He presented a completely counter-narrative. He alleged that the Muslim nomads were trying to alter the demographics of Jammu, where Hindus are currently the majority. He claimed, quote, "They are encroaching our forests and water resources," and asserted the accused had been falsely implicated, saying the real culprits were still free.
Right, and this isn't just some abstract political talking point. It's rooted in deeply felt historical grievances on both sides, you could argue. The Gujars, as you mentioned, they're a nomadic community. Their traditional way of life is increasingly challenged by modern land ownership, resource demands. Their very existence relies on seasonal movement, access to grazing land often seen as public or forest land, which others might see as vacant or, well, ripe for encroachment. And for the Hindu residents, concerns about demographic shifts, about resource strain, those are genuinely held fears in a region where identity and religious majority are deeply tied to political power. What this case did, essentially, was take those simmering abstract tensions and give them this horrifying human face. It made compromise or even just objective fact-finding incredibly difficult. The alleged motive, whether it's land or demographics, it quickly overshadowed the specifics of the crime itself in the public discourse. And this just exposes those deep pre-existing fault lines between Hindu-majority Jammu and the Muslim-majority Kashmir Valley in this sharply divided state. Remember, the Kashmir Valley has been experiencing an armed revolt against Indian rule since 1989, so any religious or ethnic tension there is incredibly volatile.
So, This entanglement of crime and politics seems almost inevitable in a region like Kashmir, doesn't it? What are the immediate and maybe long-term consequences when a legal process becomes so deeply politicized like this, especially for the victims and their communities?
Oh, the consequences are dire. They're far-reaching. Immediately, it means justice itself is obstructed, right?
Yeah.
It's tainted by external pressures. For the victims community, it just deepens their sense of marginalization, their vulnerability. It creates an environment where they feel they just cannot trust the system. And long term, it entrenches divisions. It makes reconciliation almost impossible. And it can potentially fuel further cycles of mistrust, maybe even violence. The core issue of the crime itself often gets completely lost amidst the ideological battle.
That's a truly bleak outlook. And the aftershocks were immediate and far-reaching. The arrests sparked significant protests in Jammu. And incredibly, lawyers, who are meant to uphold the law, they actively tried to stop police from entering the court to file the charge sheet. They were physically impeding the judicial process. And this wasn't just a few individuals. Our sources describe groups of lawyers blocking roads, even surrounding the court building.
That image alone is just startling, isn't it? Lawyers, the gatekeepers of the legal system, actively obstructing the filing of a charge sheet in a child's rape and murder case. It's an extraordinary act. It really demonstrates just how deeply polarized and politically charged the situation had become. It's basically a direct attack on the rule of law, on the independence of the judiciary.
Indeed. And adding even more fuel to that fire, two ministers from the Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party, the BJP, which ruled the state in a coalition with the Regional People's Democratic Party at the time, they actually attended a rally in support of the accused. I mean, this move further polarized an already explosive situation. What kind of message do political figures send when they openly align themselves with those accused in such a heinous crime?
Well, this raises a really important question, doesn't it? When political figures openly support those accused in such a heinous crime, what message does that send about justice and accountability in a deeply divided society? It effectively validates one narrative over another, not based on evidence, but on identity. And that can further fracture an already fragile social fabric. It undermines faith in the judicial process itself. It suggests that political expediency can trump justice, that allegiances based on religion or community take precedence over the law.
That level of institutional erosion is just alarming. And it wasn't just happening in the streets. You see this political polarization playing out even within the halls of power, right in the Jammu and Kashmir State Assembly. The incident even spilled into legislative debate. Mian Altaf, who's an influential Gujar leader and an opposition legislator, he dramatically waved newspapers with Asifa's photographs while demanding an inquiry. And in response, Rajiv Jasrotia, a BJP lawmaker, dismissed the incident as a family matter and, quite controversially, blamed Mr. Alta for politicizing the crime. It's just hard to imagine that being called a family matter when it clearly had such immense public and political implications.
Yeah, that exchange in the assembly is incredibly telling. The attempt to frame it as a family matter is such a dismissive tactic, isn't it? It's trying to depoliticize a highly public and sensitive issue, effectively silencing the demands for accountability and broader social justice. It's an attempt to erase the systemic issues the case brought to light, to deny the agency of the victim's community, and then to accuse a leader from the affected community of politicizing the crime simply for seeking justice. That's a classic deflection strategy.
And the media coverage itself just reflected this stark division. While newspapers in Srinagar, the capital of the Muslim-majority Kashmir Valley, they carried the story on their front pages, highlighting the tragedy, the calls for justice. It received very little attention in Jammu, the Hindu-majority region. This disparate media coverage, it speaks volumes about the narratives being shaped and consumed in different parts of the state. It feels like it further solidifies existing biases rather than fostering any kind of shared understanding.
Absolutely. The media in these kinds of polarized environments often acts as a mirror, reflecting and sometimes even amplifying existing divisions. When two regions within the same state experience such completely divergent reporting on a single high-profile crime, it just deepens the information divide. It means that people in Srinagar and Jammu were effectively living in different informational realities. That makes it even harder for any common ground or shared sense of justice to emerge. It's a critical factor in how public opinion is shaped and how communities react.
And the injustices, tragically, they continued even after Asifa's death. The Gujars wanted to bury Asifa in a graveyard where they had purchased land years ago. They already had 5 family members buried there. It was their sacred resting place, a place of generational connection, of peace. However, when they arrived at the graveyard, Mr. Pujwala stated they were surrounded by Hindu right-wing activists who threatened them with violence if they proceeded with the burial. Just imagine that. The profound grief of losing a child so brutally, compounded by the indignity of being denied the basic right to bury her in your chosen family resting place. The family was physically intimidated. They were forced to abandon their chosen burial site. Mr. Pujwala recounted the heartbreaking decision, saying, "We had to walk 7 miles to bury her in another village." His wife, Mrs. Bibi, in her deep sorrow, still poignantly remembered Asifa as that chirping bird who ran like a deer and who diligently looked after the herd when they traveled, emphasizing her cherished place not just in their immediate family, but in their entire community. This final cruel act. It truly underlines the profound layers of conflict present in this deep dive.
Yeah, the denial of a proper burial it's a profound act of dehumanization. And it's a final symbolic act of displacement. It reinforces the very conflict over land and identity that the crime itself allegedly stemmed from. For a nomadic community where roots are often defined by family and tradition rather than fixed addresses, a burial ground represents this crucial anchor of belonging, of heritage. To be denied that, even in death, signifies a complete rejection of their presence and their dignity within that landscape. It's just a stark reminder of how, even after death, the struggle for dignity and belonging can continue for marginalized communities.
So, as we've unpacked Asifa Bana's tragic story, it's become starkly clear, hasn't it? This was never just about a single crime, it was a catalyst. It revealed and exacerbated these deep seated religious tensions, land disputes, political fault lines, eroding faith in institutions in a region already grappling with decades of conflict. The initial act of violence against a child, horrific as it was, it quickly became a battleground for these much larger societal struggles.
Exactly. And understanding this case isn't just about knowing the facts. It's about recognizing how individual tragedies can become these flashpoints for broader societal issues. It highlights the vulnerability of minority communities and the profound impact political narratives can have on the pursuit of justice. It underscores how easily a localized incident can be weaponized in a larger political struggle, and how difficult it becomes to achieve true justice when the lines between crime, politics, and identity blur so completely.
Which leaves us with a question, I think. In a world grappling with information overload, what responsibility do we bear to look beyond the surface of a headline? To understand the intricate layers of human conflict, the pursuit of justice, and that desperate yearning for dignity that a story like Asifa's illuminates. This case reminds us that sometimes the most horrific acts aren't isolated incidents, but rather grim reflections of the deeper societal currents swirling beneath.